A number of you asked about what's often called the reference class problem. And this is a problem we talked about when we wanted to figure out what the process was we should be evaluating for reliability. So I gave an example where your sister told you that your mom would be home late, and we wondered, well, what was the process by which you formed your belief that your mom will be home late? Was it testimony, testimony from a family member, testimony from somebody who usually lies to you? And so we thought, well, things are going to be different. Whether we say the belief's justified or not will be different if we think of that as testimony from a family member, which might be very reliable, versus testimony from somebody who usually lies to you, which might be very unreliable. So how we describe, how we conceive of and describe the method by which you form that belief will actually change what the view says, what reliabilism says about whether it's justified or not. Now, I received a bunch of questions about this. One question said something like this: if you just make the description as specific as possible, it doesn't seem to be problematic. In my example that I just described, testimony from someone who lies to me or tends to lie to me seems to capture all that's needed, so we could say the belief is unjustified. But imagine that your sister was telling the truth this time. Then we have a more specific description. We have a description, testimony from someone who lies to me but is telling the truth this time. Or if you're looking outside and it appears that you see a sheep, but really it is a goat or something, you might think, well, usually you're reliable, but we can describe the process as perception of seeing something that looks like a sheep but is actually a goat. Now, what's going on here? Well, the problem with this being so specific is that it actually collapses justification into truth. When we think about the case of describing your sister's testimony as testimony from someone who usually lies to you, but is this time telling the truth, that might be like the most precise description. It entails that what she said was true. Likewise, perception of something that looks like a sheep to you usually, but is in fact a goat, it entails, if you were justified in this way, it entails the truth of what you believe. And so I think we might think if we cut up processes as finely as possible, belief forming process as finely as possible, we're going to miss out on this notion of justification that we actually think goes on, where it could be different from truth. Another related question was like, can we expect to have any sort of objective answer to this, to what the right description is of the belief forming process? Or is it always context dependent, or is it subjective in some way? I'm not really sure the answer to that question. I think this is a hard question for the reliabilists. Is there an objective fact of the matter about how we chop up, how we cut up different processes of belief formation, how finely? We just talked about maybe the most fine way of cutting it up might not be what we're looking for. But what about if we cut it a little more generally or a little more generally than that? It's unclear exactly whether there's an objective answer, whether it depends on the context we're in. I think that's a tough question that we should think about and maybe can talk about on Wednesday.